friends. My name is Lisa Deal, and I wanted to share my story with y'all. I am 45 years old. I've been married for almost 15 years, and I have two beautiful girls, ages 14 and 11. Those girls are a big part of my story. They are the reason I do what I do, and they are totally my why. But there's some backstory to that. Becoming a mother in general is life-changing, as most of us know. However, having a child with a diagnosis is a little more challenging. So my story doesn't necessarily start there, but that's a big part of my story. My background is in orthodontics. I spent 22 years working in orthodontics, and I loved it. I loved helping people. And what I figured out is even after I felt like I had spent enough time doing that, I wanted to move on to something else, which ended up being a mom, which is the best job ever. I realized that I love serving people in whatever form that is. It just feeds my soul. So that leads me to where I am today. But we all have a story. So my story begins as far as what I want to share, because life in general is a story. However, there are certain things that happen in our lives that mold us or lead us on a path that we didn't necessarily think was going to happen or anticipate, right? So about, my daughter is 11, like I said, my youngest, and she has mosaic Down syndrome. Most people are very unfamiliar with that, and so don't feel bad if you don't know what it is. Basically, it is a very rare form of Down syndrome, and the best way to describe it is to say that kiddos with trisomy 21, which most people are familiar with, have about 90+%, some of them are like 98, 99% of their cells are affected with an extra chromosome. For mosaic Down syndrome children, or people in general, they have a lower percentage. So my daughter was born with 25% of her cells affected with an extra chromosome. So she doesn't have the same physical attributes as the trisomy 21 kiddos do, but she certainly has a lot of challenges with learning, and we are working on those every single day and doing whatever we can to support her. But we got to go way back 11 years ago to when she was born, and we were holding that precious baby in our arms, and the doctor said, "You're probably wondering why we're looking at the palms of her hand." And we looked at her like, "No, man, we haven't slept. We're not looking at that. No." And she said, "Well, one of the nurses thought that your daughter may possibly have Down syndrome." And we, perfect pregnancy, didn't have any problems, everything, all our tests were great. So obviously we were very surprised by that, right? And so she said, "But don't worry about it. I don't think she has it." But she did have low blood sugar, which kept us in the hospital for about a week after she was born. When we came home with her and everything had kind of settled down, my husband and I both kind of looked at each other and said, she's kind of weird. She said, "I don't think she has it." And the more we thought about it, the more it bothered us. So we reached out to our pediatrician and asked her to explain. And she said, "Well, the only way we're going to find out is if we do a blood test." And we decided that it would be better to know than to not know, so that we could stop thinking about it or get educated about it, right? Those were the two choices at the time. So we did do the blood test, and it was probably the longest week of my life waiting for the results. And when the results came in, the pediatrician had called me and said, "Hey, Lisa, is Todd coming with you to the appointment tomorrow?" And I said, he wasn't going to. Is everything okay? She said, "Well, I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about this together." And right then I knew there was a problem. So we got on the phone with her instead of waiting for the appointment, because I said to her straight up, like, girl, you better tell me what's going on. There's no way I'm going to be able to sleep tonight and come in there tomorrow. You got the results. Just give it to us. So she told us that Miley tested positive for mosaic Down syndrome, and that she still wanted us to come in the next day to kind of educate us about it, I suppose. After bawling my eyes out all night, we went the next day, and she gave us some information that was printed off of Google that was very generic and not very informative. And as I sat there and cried, she reached out, held my hand, and said, "It's okay. These kiddos live to be 60 nowadays and have jobs." I'm sorry, that was not a consolation for me. I was not happy with her trying to comfort me in that way. Looking back on it now, I can say, yeah, she was doing the best she could. And now that I know so much more and know that even back then, 11 years ago, they didn't know as much about mosaic Down syndrome as they do today, which is great. But it's uncharted waters, and it's scary, and it's a little death. You go through a little bit of mourning. Mourning, that's where I get emotional, that you don't have the child you thought you were going to have. So, I'm going to try not to be a blubbering mess through this, because it's been a long time now. But, you know, you get past that. And obviously she was perfect in our eyes, so it didn't matter. It didn't matter. It was just the fear of not knowing where she would struggle, how she would struggle, all those things. So we, as I think most parents do, 100% trusted our medical professionals because they know more than I do, right? At least that's what I thought at the time. And I was never one to question them. I just kind of did what they said. I just did what they said. Because it was scary enough as it was. I needed to trust somebody. I needed someone to tell me what to do, what was going to be best for my child. That was the mindset I had been in for many years. So we're going to fast forward till Miley's 5 years old. And we are living here in Texas. New doctors, establishing pediatricians, all the above, establishing Down syndrome clinic contacts and things like that. And she had struggled tremendously with constipation. And when I say struggled, I mean blood curdling, screaming, coming from the bathroom when she's trying to move her bowels. It was terrible. And as a mother, I felt helpless. Like, what can I do to help her? Oh my gosh. You know, my neighbors would be over and they'd hear her and say, "Is she okay?" Like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrible." I said, I know it's terrible. Took her to the pediatrician. What can we do about this? This seems to be a common occurrence. Pediatrician, y'all hear the cicadas? Sorry, squirrel moment. Anyhow, it's so loud. So we go. The pediatrician proceeds to tell me that constipation is very common in kids with Down syndrome because of their low muscle tone. And of course, I'm like, yes, I've read that. Okay, what do we do? How do we fix it? And she said, well, we're going to put her on Miralax. And I said, okay. And she said, you're going to do it this many times a day, twice a day. And I said, okay. And she didn't say, like, for how many days. And I said, well, how long do we do that? And she said, oh, indefinitely. And I said, for the rest of her life? She said, yeah. Very nonchalant, like no big deal. And it was the first time that I had that voice inside that said, I don't feel good about that. I didn't even know why at the time. I just knew that I was not okay with it. And we left that day, and I came home and I did research. And I looked and looked and looked on the internet. And a couple of the first things I found were that Miralax was not approved for children under the age of 17. That Miralax is not meant for long-term use. Those two things alone, why would she have it in my 5-year-old for the rest of her life then? Very confused. And then I started researching into ingredients and found that antifreeze is in Miralax. And I thought, well, how on earth do you put antifreeze in Miralax and give it to kids? It started me down the rabbit hole. And I told myself at that point, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to educate myself. I am going to make sure that I know everything. I know you can't know everything, but you know what I'm saying. Like literally, I need to know all the things as much as I can. So I researched some natural alternatives to Miralax. We did not have any luck with it. Now we did use the Miralax because the doctor told us to and because it was giving her relief. And in the meantime, I was looking for alternatives. So that's that point. Now we're going to go back maybe a couple months prior to that. And I had started doing CrossFit and I was loving it, but I am asthmatic and I've always struggled with it. And I had a dear friend who said, hey, in the middle of our workout here, put this on your chest, and she'd handed me a little bottle of goodness like this. And I was like, what is that? She said, it's essential oils. And I said, well, I don't even know what that means. What is it? And so, but I can't breathe. I put it on my chest. I'm like, okay, great. And I'm breathing and I'm breathing and I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I'm breathing, and I loved it. And so every time we'd go work out, she'd share some of her oils with me and I would get this amazing, relief from my symptoms. So I'm speaking with her then the next day, talking about my struggles with my baby. And she says, have you ever thought about using the oils on her? And I said, no, I haven't, because I've tried other natural alternatives and they were not effective. So she says, well, here, use these 2 oils, blah. So I used the oils. At that time, I purchased my starter kit too. I said, okay, I'm in on this. I'm experiencing relief, and if it's giving me some relief, surely it can do something for my baby. And at this point, as a mother who has no other choices that she's aware of, I would try anything to give my kid relief, right? I think any mom would. Like, what can I do? I will take her pain for her, So we started using the oils multiple times a day, probably about 4 times a day on her tummy, specific oils for digestive support. And as I was doing that, I was slowly weaning her off of the Miralax. And fast forward a couple months later, no Miralax, no constipation, just oils. What? Hallelujah. Praise God. Thank you. And you know what? The more research I did and looked into it, and I'm so geeky about like the Bible and, verses and how they relate and all that stuff. And do you know that essential oils are mentioned in the Bible over 1,000 times? It just aligned with my faith as well. It was like this big aha moment of, wow, this is what God intended these plants for. He didn't put them here just for us to look at them. That'll be pretty. They have therapeutic and medicinal value, and they are super powerful. And they have changed my life drastically. So much so that my passion to this day is to scream it from the mountaintops. Every person needs to know they have an alternative. They have choices. They just need to explore them. So that's my job today. Today, I am so proud to say that I spend my time every day educating others on health and wellness, empowering people to take their health and wellness into their own hands and actually be their own advocate and do what is best for their bodies, to pay attention to their bodies, to their families. I teach people daily how to remove toxins in their home, and it feels my soul. It is my why, and this video is meant to share my sad points, my vulnerability, I guess, but also share the goodness that came from it and the abundance that came from it. And I am surrounded by a tribe of people, like-minded people, that share the same passion as I do. So, with that said, if you feel like this is something that you'd like to try, you'd like to jump on this oily bandwagon, this journey, as I call it, I would love to have you. I would love to help you. I would love to hold your hand and run with you. So, that's it. That's my story. Thanks for watching, and God bless.